in some strange turn of events, I got up today and I thought what I should do is I should try and actually fix ants. And crazily enough, I say I fixed it, I haven't fixed it. Basically, I thought, well, ants could still be a deck. Ants could still be usable. It's just the problem with ants right now is lack of support, lack of generic insect support as well, and then also just generally weak. But I think that I've done something, and it's all without using delirium, which to me is super important, just because I know everyone out there can just say, well, if you're going to do any insect deck, slap in a couple of delirium, slap in a few more extras, those nice little ultra rare generic spells and traps, and call it a day. But I thought about it. There's a lot of good ones out there, but I thought, no, we're gonna try and make something suitable, I think, for the deck, and so this is what I've come up with. So, start off with 3 copies of Antbellion. I'll actually move this off the frame. Yeah, 3 copies of Antbellion. His age shows, he's at 100 attack, 100 defense, level 7. You pay 100 life points to activate his effect, and all it does is, until the end of the turn, all face-up monsters you control, which is an insect, and it has to have 100 or less attack points. They gain 800 attack times the number of monsters that I control. So if I had 3 on the field by some good fortune, it wouldn't even work out, to be honest, because only one of them would work. But 3 Antbellion, just because that's the boss monster. There's no point in doing ants if you're not going to use the boss monster. And I've thought of a way to sort of take advantage. Next, 3 copies of Metal Armored Ant. It says Secret Order target, but there's no Secret Order in this deck, and I'll tell you for why. He has 100 attack and 2500 defense. The problem is with Secret Order is it could special summon him, I don't have to tribute a thing, but then he turns to 800 attack as a result of Secret Order's effect, which means then he is automatically disqualified from Antbellion's effect, and that would just be a waste, because he's not going to gain any attack from elsewhere. Well, he could do, but no Secret Order. The idea is you want a tribute for him, and I don't know why, but it will make sense in time. 3 Thanksgiving, just because I wanted at least one as their level 1 ants with 100 attack, and this is probably the best one just because of the defense value. 2 copies of Ravenous Insect Matalis. I know what you're thinking, what the hell is going on here? You activate his effect by sending the top card of your deck to the graveyard, and then you can choose one monster your opponent controls which is insect type, and it loses 800 attack and defense. The reason why he's here is not because of his effect. The reason why he's here is to get rid of any insects that's not going to be getting buffed up by Antbellion, basically. So the idea is that if there's some other thing on the field that can't get buffed up by Antbellion, then at least he can just be tributed for instead, and then you have something with it. 1700, it's not massive, but it ain't tiny either. It'll do something. Three copies of Pinch Hopper, because this is what you really want to be using instead. You can special summon an insect monster from your hand to your field, all by getting rid of him from your field. So it's pretty straightforward. Metal Armored Insect, Metal Armored Ant, or Antbellion. Special summon with that. Pretty straightforward. 3 copies of Dramoth Caterpillar. Just draw power. That's all he's here for, is draw power. You know, he's not impressive stat wise, but it'll do. Draw power. 2 copies of Polygon Butterfly. Now this is okay. But this is the sort of card that I think is what I would want to be tributing from Matalas. So it basically, it's weirdly thought out. The idea would be, if I was to say have Antbellion, Metal Armored Ant, and Polygon Butterfly on my field, I use Antbellion's effect. Everything on this field will then gain attack, as his effect describes. Polygon Butterfly won't, but the idea is that you use Antbellion's effect first, then Polygon Butterfly's effect second, which is, if there's 3 or more insect monsters in my graveyard, I can send the top card of my deck to my graveyard, then I'm going to choose 1 level 8 or lower insect monster I control, and then it gains 200 attack for that turn, and it can attack monsters twice. And that then is the reason why you then tribute from Matalas, because once he's used up his effect, he's no good on the field anymore. Not with 400 attack. But Antbellion can now attack twice, which is a good. It's best. I know his maximum attack is 2500 attack, but doing that twice is like, well, it'll be 2700 attack, so he can beat over Dragias, and he can do something. So Polygon Butterfly is not that bad. I would have put it at 3, but I don't think it's like one of those effects that I would want to see every turn, just because it's kind of, I don't know, it's a bit of a gimmick. I did try and resist the temptation of it, but 3 copies of Contund Insect would soon be the prayer beads. Why is he here? Well, so basically his effect is no requirement, but the effect is a continuous effect. Your dark insect monsters with continuous effects inflict piercing. Nothing here is a dark insect monster with a continuous effect, but we have 3 copies of him, and I'll tell you for why. Because the very simple reason that you take no battle damage from insect monsters that you control. So if you lose Antbellion, you don't die, basically. It's kind of weird, but also he gains the attack as well from Antbellion, which is super good. He'll only go up to 2400 rather than 25 like Antbellion or Metal Armored Ant would. But this is actually alright. This is not too bad. It ain't amazing, but it's not too bad either. Just no battle damage alone is like, it makes him valuable to the deck, because the problem with the deck is, well, super low attack values means they're like, you know, on a vulnerable turn, it potentially went OTK. The little Silkworm dude, Silkworm Fibrillon, 3 copies of him. Same thing again. He can actually gain the attack boost from Antbellion, and then if I control another insect monster, I can send the top 2 cards of my deck to the graveyard, choose 1 monster my opponent controls, and then that monster's type becomes insect. So it kind of works well with Matalas, you know, just for that little attack drop, but it's not an amazing thing at all, really. Like, we're not invested in the deck for that. You could probably explore that avenue a bit more, of forcing other monsters to become insect, but then at that point then you drifted into delirium territory, which I didn't really want to do. And for the wild card of it all, Super Conductor Tyranno. Send one monster on my field to the graveyard, inflict 1000 damage, and then he can't attack. A little bit of burn, but also it's a pretty threatening monster. And then next, Dark Hole. I thought about something like Mage Power. You know, just because there's a fair few spells and traps in this deck, surprisingly. And I thought about Mage Power just because you can have, ideally, a field spell and at least 2 traps set. Mage Power would have given Antbellion 2000 extra attack. But, I don't know. I'm not sure yet. But, Dark Hole's pretty good though. Just for a little bit of extra removal. You know, because the problem with this deck is it's not going to beat over everything. You know, if you're facing down something like an Eternal Galactica Oblivion or some other big monster with an attack that you just can't deal with, Dark Hole is probably your best bet, really, because you can't brute force it then. 2 copies of Sunny Forest. When it's in face up in the field zone, all defense position insect monsters cannot be destroyed by card effects. So you can kind of see like a little combo with this already. There's a trap card coming up that will force my insect monsters into defense position. So imagine then Antbellion in defense position, and then you have something like, I don't know, Antbellion, Metal Armadant, and then maybe Thanksgiving. Then you can just use Dark Hole then to get rid of the opponent's field, and that's 3 attacks of 2500 attack on your field. So that's 7500. You're practically in spitting distance of an OTK. Intrude Beetle, 2 copies, just because a little bit of draw, spell and trap destruction. You know, it's the standard stuff really. 3 copies of Insect Rampage. Shuffle 2 monsters from my graveyard into my deck, and then all face-up monsters that's insect type that I control gain 300 attack, and then if my opponent controls an insect monster, I can destroy 1 level 8 or lower monster that they control, which is pretty good, you know. Just because, well, even in like the example turn that I just gave, where like, you know, the absolute best thing would happen where you use Sunny Forest and Dark Hole and you got 3 monsters on your field, this will basically enable the OTK. 1 copy of Negate Attack, just because you're not always going to have the best turns. I did think about Magic Cylinder, but I think I would rather the extra bit of defense rather than a bit of burn. 2 copies of Enchant Barrier. Really important to call it Enchant Barrier rather than Ancient Barrier, because those are 2 different cards. But if my opponent's level 8 or lower monster declares an attack, I can shuffle 2 monsters into my deck from my graveyard, and then that monster loses 800 attack. And if I have a face-up defense position monster, which is also an insect type on my field, I can destroy the attacking monster. And this is the card that I kind of wish had a spell variant too. Lazybugged. Pretty simple card. If my opponent normal or special summons a monster, I can activate it, and then I can change up to 3 of my insect monsters from attack position to defense position. And then obviously it has an additional effect where if I have 3 monsters that I've just changed now into the defense position, I can force 1 of their monsters then also into defense position. So it's like really good. It's really interesting. I think it's actually really good. You know, something like Lazybugged which can basically enable a play with Sunny Forest. And then just imagine, you know, you have Sunny Forest, which means you can't destroy things by card effects. You don't take any battle damage with Utsumi. And then, yeah, it's a strange deck that actually I think it kind of works. I'm sure there's a way to improve it. Obviously there's always a way to improve it, but I don't know. I think this is probably like the best non-delirium, non-throw every single ultra rare spell and trap that you can get. So deck for it. But I would really like to hear your thoughts, of course. You know, if you think that you could do it better, by all means tell me, where can I improve on this? How do I do Ants better? Happy Thanksgiving. Catch you on the flippy.